In his last speech as president, Ronald Reagan said that you can go live in France, but you cannot become a Frenchman. You can go live in Germany or Turkey or Japan, but you cannot become a German, a Turk, or a Japanese. But anyone from any corner of Earth can come to live in America and become an American. His view that immigration defines the meaning of America has shaped generations of Americans. And as conservatives, we care about the social impact of immigration as much as, if not more, than the economic benefits. But just how many immigrants is America really admitting? Are we assimilating immigrants like previous generations? And what about their political beliefs? Let's start with the most fundamental and basic question of all. How many immigrants are coming to America today, and how many have come in the past? Back in the early 1990s, when William F. Buckley, the famous conservative intellectual, argued that America was admitting too many immigrants, the number of new permanent residents ranged between 600 and 700,000 every year. But before then, America was regularly admitting over 1 million immigrants every year for over 1 decade at the beginning of the 20th century, just before World War I. The numbers are similar in recent years. In every year but one since 2005, over 1 million immigrants have obtained permanent residency in America. But America's capacity to assimilate immigrants is a function of the size of the natural population. There were less people in America in 1980 and even fewer in the early 20th century than today. So adjusting for population growth, today's immigration flows are far lower than they used to be. In fact, if we wanted to return to the levels of immigration we saw before the World Wars, legal immigration would have to triple to 3 million people per year. But how many immigrants do other nations admit compared to America then? Let's take Australia and Canada. These two are free nations where the national language is also English and French in part of Canada as well, and they're also former British colonies. While America has somewhat higher levels of income, quality of life is slightly better in both Canada and Australia by many measures. So, what's the immigration system like in these countries? How many immigrants do they admit? Australia's immigration system and Canada's alike are simple and mostly select immigrants based on skills. In other words, the opposite of the United States. In fact, these two countries are the two major developed nations with the most educated immigrants in the world. Nearly 2/3 of immigrants in Australia and Canada have a college degree. In the United States, just about 1/3 of immigrants have a college degree. Now, what about the numbers? The Australian government admits over 160,000 permanent residents every year. This is far less than America's 1 million, but Australia's population is smaller than Texas. If America admitted as many immigrants as Australia does relative to the total population, we'd have over 2 million new permanent residents every year. Of the immigrants Australia admits, over 2/3 are admitted based on their skills. Immigrants submit an application online and are assigned points based on their education, English ability, job experience, age, financial assets, and even awarded points if some Australian state nominates them based on their own criteria. The rest of the visas are awarded to family members of Australians, and all immigrants meet minimum English, financial, and health requirements. The Australian government awards available visas to the immigrants with the highest scores and then publishes the score cutoff so future immigrants know the bar they have to reach to get in the future. And temporary work visas for high-skilled workers and shortage occupations are uncapped. That is, they're determined by supply and demand, not government bureaucrats. Compare this to the United States, where far fewer green cards are awarded based on skills, and where the main high-skill visa, the H-1B, is capped by Congress at a mere $85,000 per year for a country of 331 million people. What about Canada? Canada admits over 300,000 new permanent residents each year across all categories. Canada's population is smaller than California, however. If the United States admitted a proportionate amount of immigrants, the number of new permanent residents every year would jump from 1 to 2.6 million. Canada's system is like Australia's, point-based. 2/3 of all immigrants come based on their skills and the rest through family ties, asylum, or refugee status. Therefore, not only does America admit far fewer immigrants than its historical average, the United States also admits less than half of the relative level of legal immigrants admitted by similar nations and allies like Canada and Australia. We're far from a level where assimilation and integration would be at risk from too much immigration. Okay, so this is the point where you tell me, okay, Daniel, we could admit many more immigrants, but What about what they'll do to our culture? Well, first of all, the overwhelming majority of Americans want more high-skilled immigration. One of the few polls done on this matter of high-skilled immigration is the Global Attitude Survey, which asked Americans in 2018, thinking about immigration, would you support or oppose encouraging highly skilled people to immigrate and work into our country? To which 8 in 10 Americans said yes. The same opinion Canadians and Australians had. Gallup polling, on the other hand, has support for increasing total levels of immigration at a record high, and only 1/3 of Americans want less immigration, which could be interpreted as including illegal, not just legal. But even among those who say they want less immigration, the Pew Research Center shows that 2/3 of them want to encourage more high-skilled people to immigrate to America. So high-skilled immigration is an area where there is consensus. And an Ipsos poll found that 8 in 10 Americans as well want to make it easier for high-skilled immigrants to come, including more than 75% of Republicans. Now regarding culture, most immigrants arriving in new countries speak different languages, have different traditions, and especially important for culture, have different principles shaped by their experiences and their upbringings abroad. For example, I come from Venezuela. I was shaped deeply by my experiences with socialism, which made me skeptic of government and a fierce defender of freedom myself. Such an experience is similar for immigrants who come from other socialist nations like Cuba, the former USSR, or Vietnam. So what does the evidence tell us? Do we immigrants change American culture? Do immigrants change culture in other countries they go to? Surprisingly, the answer is no. Economists in Europe and Canada decided to study this issue by using global polls about values such as morality, religiosity, support for democracy, and even trust for others. They evaluated each country to get an idea of how similar or different cultures in each of them were. They found that people around the world are actually becoming more similar in their values, and what's more, it's immigration that's driving the change. But it's not because immigrants make America or other Western nations more like where they came from. The opposite happens. More immigration is associated with making the home country of the immigrants more similar to their destination country. In other words, Mexican immigrants don't make America more like Mexico. They make Mexico more like America. The reasons are up for speculation. But one likely explanation is that in our very globalized world, immigrants can stay in touch with friends and relatives in their home countries, and they share the things they learn here in America with them. If you don't buy this, I get it. It's just one study using one survey that may ask good questions, but like every study, it has limitations. So let's talk about the immigrants in America right now. In the United States, only 52% of immigrants ages 5 and over speak English very well. This is not too different from back in 1980, when 57% of them did. The somewhat lower proficiency was driven by the flow of illegal immigrants from Central America and Mexico, not those who have been through any kind of visa processing or selection. But it's still a very large problem. Proficiency in speaking and writing English is essential for integration. Speaking English is required to get hired for most jobs and to get a high school or college degree. It's also critical for socialization. If immigrants can't speak English, they will find it hard to make friends with most Americans who only speak English. This can lead to self-segregation of immigrants in neighborhoods and slows assimilation even further. This problem is more serious in some parts of the country than others. While only 9% of the population in the United States is of limited English proficiency, 19% of the population of the state of California is. In other words, 1 in 5 residents of California don't speak English well. This doesn't mean that they can speak any English, but that they have limited ability. The self-segregation and large number of immigrants with limited proficiency has led California to have the largest number of native-born Americans who can't speak English themselves, resulting in troubles accessing healthcare, education, employment, and hurting everybody, not just those who can speak English. To fix this problem, we need an immigration system based on skills that would award points for English proficiency, something the current system of family migration doesn't require. But not all news on this front is bad. The number of limited proficiency individuals who are native-born, that's most likely the children of immigrants born here who don't speak English very well, is shrinking. And our current state isn't uncommon in US history. In fact, only 9% of immigrants who arrived between 2000 and 2010 don't speak any English. The same was true for nearly 11% of immigrants who came 120 years ago. And knowledge of some English, even if limited, is much higher today than in the past for immigrants from all over the world. While 2/3 of Mexican immigrants in the decade ending in 1920 didn't speak any English, over 80% of those coming in the decade ending in 2010 did speak some English. The Chinese went from 50 to 85%, and the Italians from 50 to 98% in that same period. Now let's talk integration. There are several key measures of integration, including intermarriage between Americans and immigrants, identity, and even geographic location. Intermarriage between Latin American immigrants and native-born Americans is at par with intermarriage rates between European immigrants and Americans in the past. We know that people with higher levels of education intermarry at higher rates, however, making a stronger case for expanded skills-based legal immigration that admits more highly educated immigrants, who we know will integrate faster into society. The children of immigrants also intermarry with other races at higher rates than their parents, and even higher at higher levels of education. Immigrants are also assimilating at rates similar to the past by many other measures, included, believe it or not, the names of their children. See, immigrants tend to give their children more foreign-sounding names. That is, names that are very rare in the United States. That has always been the case. So the question is whether this difference has changed from the past. So a peer-reviewed paper published in the American Economic Review Journal sought to answer this exact question by finding birth record data in California to see whether the immigrants named their children more like other Americans the longer they live in America. The authors in this study found that both immigrants who came in the early 20th century and those who come today erase about half of the naming gap of children after 20 years in the United States. And while immigrants from poorer countries have larger naming gaps with Americans, they also close those gaps at much faster rates, meaning they assimilate faster. These researchers were able to know this by using birth records of the state of California that span over 100 years, an incredible task, one that shines a light on this issue we care about. What about broader measures of assimilation? A 2008 report published by the Manhattan Institute for Policy Research developed a cultural, economic, and civic assimilation index of immigrants. Taking into account military service, naturalization, marriage, family size, jobs, and other characteristics, the goal was to get an idea of how similar or how different Americans and immigrants are. The assimilation index for the average immigrant today is slightly lower than that of the past. But this is a bit misleading. The index awards points for naturalizing, and today, citizenship is much more difficult to obtain than 100 years ago. Indeed, if we exclude citizenship status, the assimilation index is almost constant over time. All in all, the author, Dr. Jacob Bigdor, found that immigrants of the past quarter century have assimilated more rapidly than their counterparts of a century ago, even though they are more distinct from the native population upon arrival. An updated report by Dr. Bigdor in 2013 found that immigrants are assimilating even faster after the Great Recession, and as a whole, immigrants are more assimilated than at any point since 1980, especially because many unassimilated immigrants, mainly illegal, have returned to Mexico. Finally, I want us to debunk the myth that immigrants are just Democratic voters in the West, or people with little attachment to America. Yes, immigrants tend to vote Democrat, and by large margin, with some national origin group exceptions. But in states like California, immigrants are more likely to say that they're conservative and less likely to say that they're liberal than the US-born residents of that state. If this is true in California, a liberal stronghold, imagine how many more conservative immigrants live in other states. But this brings up another question. Why do so many moderate and conservative immigrants vote Democrat? My theory is that the immigration stances of the major parties have something to do with it. While 7 in 10 Californians think immigrants are a benefit, 9 in 10 immigrants do. On the other hand, immigrants are more patriotic than native-born Americans. 75% of naturalized Americans are very proud of being Americans, compared with 69% of native-born residents. The survey also asked respondents how proud they were of the fair and equal treatment of all groups in America, to which 71% of all immigrants, naturalized or not, said that they were either very or somewhat proud. Compare that to only 59% of native-born Americans. In other words, immigrants believe more than native-born Americans themselves that America is a country where people are treated equally. My guess for why this is that there are many of us who weren't raised in the current environment of victimhood in the United States. We haven't been taught the woke nonsense from the left that everybody is a victim. Far from viewing ourselves as victims, we immigrants are thankful for the opportunity to be here and consider ourselves blessed for that. On a related note, a whopping 69% of native-born Americans say that they were ashamed of some aspects of America. Only 39% of immigrants agreed. Not just that, but immigrants think American culture is superior to foreign cultures, more than native-born Americans themselves. 39% of immigrants agree that the world would be a better place if people were more like Americans. And even more non-citizen immigrants agree with that than naturalized Americans. Compare that to only 29% of Americans who were born here that agree. Immigrants are patriotic. They're assimilating as quickly as they were in the past, if not more quickly, and they're speaking English better and better every year. Far from destroying American culture, they seek to change the culture in their home countries. They are America's ultimate cultural export, a way to make the world more like America, not America more like the world. Highly skilled immigrants assimilate faster than everybody else. Rich countries all over the world have recognized this and opened their doors to them. Americans agree and want more high-skilled immigrants to come. The conclusion is clear. America should expand high-skilled immigration. The question is how. And that's what I will tell you in the next video. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and click here to watch the previous video about the economics of high-skilled immigration if you haven't, and here to watch exactly what reforms we must pursue to expand legal high-skilled immigration.